keep anything you have to say succinct, I'd appreciate it. Yes, sir, right there.
Stewart Reuter. Two questions, one for our congressman. You mentioned in your discussion that you thought there was a Fifth Amendment condition to the constitutionality, but you did not expand on that.
It's taking property without due process of law.
And the other would be something which I think is another tax you didn't mention, something about 3.8% on investments to go.
I did mention that, and there the tax is specifically headed imposition of tax. That's the passive income. It's not active income, meaning wages.
I saw that the IRS commissioner was suggesting they could, this mandate that has no enforcement mechanism in tax law, that they would enforce it by stealing people's refunds or withholding a portion of their refunds. Does that raise any issues other than being irregular as a matter of law? Does it raise any constitutional issues about?
Well, the statute does not prohibit the statute prohibits the IRS from attaching liens against your property. And a number of other mechanisms that it would normally use to enforce the tax law. That's one of the reasons why we can tell that this is not a tax, because it doesn't use the normal enforcement mechanisms. But it does not prohibit the IRS, which is mandated, which is authorized to enforce this, from enforcing it with any other means it has. For example, withholding part of your refunds.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, right back here.
Hi, I'm Diana Marrero with the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. My question is, what do you make of the argument that it could be seen as a tax refund for people who do choose to buy insurance and not necessarily a tax on people who don't?
It's just what the case law has shown over the years is that the court will defer to how Congress to how Congress characterizes its claim of power. So if Congress claims to be exercising a tax power, the court's not going to say, oh, it's really exercising its regulatory power under the Commerce Clause, and therefore, since it's beyond its power under the Commerce Clause, we're going to strike it down. They used to, by the way, do that. They used to say, no, this is not really a tax. It's really a regulation of commerce. It's beyond Congress's power to do, therefore it's unconstitutional. But after the New Deal, it stopped doing that. It started saying that if Congress claims to be exercising its tax power and a measure has any revenue purpose whatsoever, it does have a purpose of raising revenue, we're going to call it a tax, and we're not going to evaluate it under Congress's commerce power. However, this measure is not called a tax, and it's not justified as a tax. It's justified expressly in the statute as a regulation of commerce. And it does, and in the 8 findings that support this regulation or this penalty and this mandate, none of them refer to any revenue-raising purposes. And it's not included in the portion of the bill that talks about revenue offsets, which is part of the way the bill got scored in Congress. You have to say how much revenue will it raise. This mandate, the penalty for this mandate, isn't even included amongst the revenue-raising provisions of the bill, amongst all the other revenue-raising provisions of the bill. For all of these reasons, because the mandate was justified by Congress as a regulation of commerce, I believe that is how the court will evaluate it. There is, once again, no precedent for the court going behind how Congress behind a measure that Congress characterizes as a regulation of commerce and say, oh, well, even though Congress did that, if it had done it under its tax powers, then it would be constitutional. Therefore, we're going to uphold this regulation of commerce because it could have done it this other way. There's no authority for ever doing that, and I don't think that there'll be 5 votes for doing that either in this case.
If you take a look at the text of the bill, where there are taxes, such as the tax on investment income, the tanning bed tax, it specifically says in the header of the section of the bill, imposition of tax, and then it says what's being taxed and what the rate is. The individual mandate was not so described. Now, I think that maybe in retrospect, the sponsors of Obamacare and the staffs that drafted it were having a problem, because when the Joint Tax Committee released its after the passage of the bill report, it started talking about the individual mandate being a tax, but before that nobody talked about it being a tax. They talked about it as an extension of the Congress's regulatory power on interstate commerce.
So let me just, if any of you who watched the James Bond movie Casino Royale know about poker, a tell in poker, what a tell in poker is, and that is a telltale sign of the behavior of the other side, that they are sort of telegraphing that they have a weaker hand than they claim to be having while they're bluffing. I think this switch that the Joint Committee on Taxation, the staff of the Joint Committee on Taxation did when they switched their justification of the mandate from the Commerce Clause to the tax power is a tell. It suggests to them that, it should suggest to you that all the breezy confidence that law professors and other experts have that this is a purely constitutional exercise of the commerce power, that they themselves do not feel so confident that it is, or they wouldn't in this document have failed to mention commerce at all. If you do a word search through that 157-page report, the word commerce does not appear. Instead, it is called an excise tax on persons who fail to get health insurance. That is a tell that they're not confident of the Commerce Clause power theory at all and need to try to justify it as a tax. But that switch comes too late.
I mean, Congressman, I saw Congressman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who is a leader on the Democratic side of the aisle and a very smart person, you know, spend 5 minutes talking about there's no mandate. There's no mandate.
Well, I guess the point that I want to make is that if it is a tax, you got to call it a tax in the bill. And if you don't call it a tax in the bill, then it isn't a tax. And it wasn't called a tax in the bill.
Any other questions or comments? Right in the center there. Right. Yes.
Steve Schaff from Virginia. Thanks. Kind of a two-parter here. And my intro into this is that freedom-loving Americans, I mean millions of us, obviously are outraged by this federal power grab. So you're seeing that vented through different things. You didn't mention the congressional candidate Van Irian from Tennessee, Obamacare class action lawsuit, of which I've joined and encourage all my friends to join. You have Governor Pataki, with Revere America, trying to gin up support to fight this thing. So do you see any synergies of all this public outrage? And my second part, thanks for your comments, Professor, really, really insightful. And for yourself, Congressman, we've had Senator DeMint talk about defunding this, especially if we can get more majority in the House or Senate coming up. You see, I was a little bit discouraged that you said there was no avenue due to the veto on Pennsylvania Avenue. Surely is maneuvering to put him in a box and have him, before the American people, veto something that they clearly want.
Well, this is an entitlement program. An entitlement program runs on autopilot until the basic statutory framework of the entitlement program is changed. And the three biggest entitlement programs up until now have been Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And none of that is subject to an annual appropriation by Congress. I guess that if the administration of this was defunded, then we would run the problem of a government shutdown, and that was tried by then Speaker Gingrich in 1995, and it ended up resulting in the re-election of President Clinton.
And he's no longer Speaker Gingrich.
Yeah.
I hear you there. Dick Moore was on the other day, and he's of the opinion this is so outrageous that things might go differently.
Well, the thing is sure is outrageous, and I hear that from my constituents. But the point is elections have consequences. This is the law of the land. Aim your vituperation at the people who voted in favor of it, rather than crabbing at us who fought it, for a year and, lost it, lost at the last minute. And the best shot of stopping this thing is through the courts. And I will repeat that. And that's why I'm supportive of the lawsuits that have been filed. And frankly, that's why I'm here today, rather than doing something else on the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue.